A white, snow-like furry hand broke the water's surface, clawing its way into the golden hues of the sunset. It reached for a nearby dock, fingers grasping desperately at the weathered wood. As it emerged, the furry extremity began to morph, taking on the unmistakable shape of a human hand. Finally, a man with fur covering parts of his body, blood dripping from his torn right arm, and two tails emerged from the water. He grabbed a pair of pants from the dock fence and started walking through the city streets. Fully transformed, he appeared so convincingly human that no one could suspect his true nature. He reached Charminar, where crows circled ominously overhead. Each crow symbolized a friend turned foe, a reminder that he was being hunted. Yet, this place was ideal for confronting his enemies, surrounded as it was by acres of dense forest. He looked up into the darkness of the monument, as eyes glowing in the dark, piercing through the shadows where the red eyes of betas and the fierce yellow eyes of alphas stared back at him. A young alpha leapt from the top, his clothes tearing as his transformation surged through him, an excited grin stretching across his face as he believed he could finally take him down. He transformed into a werewolf in mid-air, landing on the ground with a thunderous impact that showcased his immense strength. Witnessing this, he clenched his hand, feeling the blood gush from his wound. With a grim resolve, he knew that dangly arm would only hinder him. With a swift motion, he hurled the severed limb with all his might, piercing the alpha's chest as he entered the fray, snuffing out his life as swiftly as it had begun. As the alpha's lifeless body crumpled to the ground, the other alphas understood the grim reality. It was either they would all kill him, or he would eliminate them one by one. Another alpha stepped forward from the shadows of the forest, bathed in moonlight, impressed by the turn of events. "We poisoned your powers, yet you still managed to kill 20 of my betas and many more from other packs. It seems we underestimated the power of two tails." A hand on the old man's shoulder halted his speech. A huge, pale white man, his face betraying emotion despite the loss of his entire pack, stepped forward. "Don't worry, old man. I'll take care of this," he said, his yellow eyes piercing as he approached, towering in front of him. He clenched his fist, driven by a primal urge to punch through his chest and rip out his heart. But as excessive blood loss sapped his strength, he couldn't land a hit. In a swift motion, his other hand was severed, leaving him in shock. The giant man clutched the broken hand of his enemy, and as the camera panned, it revealed the gruesome remnants of what was left of him. He leaned over and whispered, "You're not living up to the legend, Arthur." Hearing this, he gathered strength from every fiber of his body and unleashed a powerful roundhouse kick, leaving his opponent with a broken tooth, shattered jaw, ripped cheek, and utter shock on his face. Before he could realize what had just happened, Arthur climbed onto his leg and chest, loading his broken arm with a sharp bone and ramming it into his eye. That blow knocked him down to his feet, rendering him unconscious. Seeing this, the old man transformed into his true form, a monstrous figure of raw power and rage. He charged toward his target with terrifying speed, grabbing him by the neck and slamming him into the ground with a bone-shaking force. As the dust settled from the impact, Arthur seized the opportunity, pushing the sharp bone deeper into the Alpha's hand. This action caused the old Alpha to let out a blood-curdling scream of agony, echoing through the surroundings and sending shivers down the spines. With a ferocious snarl, the old Alpha picked him up, the bone still lodged in his hand, and slammed him into the ground with such force that the earth beneath them cracked. The violent impact caused old Alpha to be wrenched free from Arthur. Alpha licks his bloody wound. He then commanded the last of his betas to kill Arthur. The betas jumped from the monument and surged forward, their eyes glinting with a murderous frenzy. As they attacked Arthur, the old Alpha turned his head back and howled, a triumphant cry that echoed through the forest, declaring his victory and asserting that the power of the Grand Alpha belonged to him. But then, a sudden and eerie silence fell over the battlefield. Turning back to Arthur, the old Alpha's eyes widened in shock. His betas lay motionless on the ground, their bodies strewn around like broken dolls. Amidst the carnage was a man dressed in black, holding Arthur's lifeless body in his hands, his presence exuding an aura of ominous calm. His betas lay with their heads severed from their bodies, blood spilling out in a single clean cut. In front of them, he held Arthur as if he were his brother, his presence paralyzing everyone. A man with grey hair from experience, the twins, and the old Alpha stood terrified of his presence. Before his death, Arthur spoke his last words, "Take back what belongs to you." Hearing this, the mysterious man raised his hand, his nails sharp as claws, and punched a hole in Arthur's chest, ripping out his heart as blood formed a trail behind it. And no one could do anything. The twins were shocked, feeling as if they had lost someone close or were encountering a being beyond their understanding. The mysterious man picked up Arthur on his shoulder, heart in his other hand, and started walking toward the forest. Before merging into the forest darkness, he said, "Make an example out of him," and disappeared. The old Alpha was so shaken that he collapsed to the ground. As he struggled to his feet, a bell sounded, and he raised his head to see a figure in black and red clothing with a face covered by a veil. A paper doll's right hand was torn, and suddenly the Alpha's hand was cut off without him noticing. When he saw his arm on the ground, blood pouring out, his pupils dilated in fear. He ran to hide, panic flooding his mind with a million thoughts. He had never been in such a situation before, his hand shaking with the fear of death. Looking for support from his allies, he found no one. "Cowards!" he shouted. He bit his arm to calm his nerves. He began to think, how did I lose my arm from such a distance? Why cover his face with a veil? What is the range of attack? Why am I so afraid? Then he remembered what Arthur had told him long ago. If fear of death is in your eyes and you feel you won't survive, that's how witches thrive. She is a witch, he thought to himself. He got an idea. Exposing his tail, he started counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She ripped the tail off a doll, and he lost the tip of his tail, so she can only attack what she can see, huh? The old Alpha used his unique ability. Every werewolf had one. A hand emerged from his back, and 2 more werewolves like him appeared. He commanded the other to dig and follow their movements, saying, "You're our hidden ace. If we die, at least I can still recover from you." Hearing this, they did as the old alpha said. The first jumped and dug underground, and then both charged toward the witch, maintaining the distance as instructed. The witch couldn't kill both. Their gamble worked. She chose one and ripped the head off the doll, instantly killing the alpha clone. But the old alpha was already above her, ready to deliver a finishing blow. The old alpha's claws tore through her veil with a ferocious swipe, and a gush of blood sprayed across his hand. Her eyeball was impaled on his claw, trailing a string of optic nerve and sinew. The veil fell to the floor, revealing her face for the first time. Brown hair framed her features, red lips twisted in a grimace of pain, and a trail of blood ran from her injured eye across her cheek. She lay sprawled on the ground, the shock of the wound evident. The old alpha, fixated on the eye stuck to his claw, realized this was his chance to learn everything about her and the mysterious man. Driven by a savage instinct, he consumed the eye. As the vitreous humor slid down his throat, a torrent of overwhelming information flooded his mind. He saw how she crafted the lethal dolls, the mechanisms behind the loss of his arm, and the decapitation of his clone. The truth was devastating and enlightening, reshaping everything he had believed. Lost in these revelations, he momentarily forgot the battle. Meanwhile, the witch staggered to her feet, an unknown insignia clutched tightly in her hand. She wiped the blood from her injured eye and let it drip onto the insignia, and cast it to the ground. The blood spread outwards, seeping into the ground, and with a rumbling growl, a massive hand made of earth erupted from the soil. A colossal earth golem, towering and formidable, emerged. It had one blue eye floating above its stone jaw, and its immense size dwarfed the alpha. The witch, now protected by a barrier of earth, watched as the golem lifted its enormous arms and brought them crashing down on the old alpha. The ground beneath him shattered, and he fell to his knees, straining to hold off the crushing force. The sheer power of the attack sent shockwaves through his body, leaving him battered and exhausted. As the old alpha struggled to recover from the impact, the golem wound up for another blow. With a mighty swing, it launched a sucker punch that sent the alpha hurtling through the air. He tumbled lifelessly like a ragdoll, unconscious and defenseless. As he began to plummet back to the ground, the golem was poised for a final devastating strike. The golem's massive hands clapped together with a force so intense that the sound waves distorted, creating a deafening boom. The alpha was crushed between the gigantic fists, the impact so powerful that his ribs splintered and protruded grotesquely through his chest, crushing his internal organs. As his broken body slammed into the earth, his life hanging by a thread, suddenly, from the depths of his chest cavity, a hand burst forth, clutching his heart. Blood cascaded down in a crimson waterfall, pooling around the ruin of his body. His clone's head emerged from his real body, blood clinging to the fur. With a vigorous shake, he cleared the fur of the gore, cleaning his body of blood. He crushed the heart in his hand, and it regenerated within the clone's body, transforming it into the original. 2 additional arms burst from his back, amplifying his strength and ferocity. The colossal golem raised its massive hand to strike, but the old alpha intercepted, digging his claws into the stony flesh. Combining his hands into a powerful fist, he swung with all his might. The golem, undeterred, retaliated with a punch of its own. Their fists collided with immense force, causing the golem's arm to shatter and crumble like brittle stone. The impact sent cracks spidering through its body. Amidst the chaos, the old alpha noticed a fragment of the insignia embedded in the golem's shoulder, the heart of the beast. As the golem's jaw creaked open, revealing a fiery glow within, it lunged to pin him down. The alpha caught its head, halting its advance, but the golem's other hand clamped onto him, restraining him tightly. Realizing his only chance was to destroy the insignia, he began to pound near the shoulder, each strike searing his skin as fire burst from the golem's mouth. Despite the burning pain, he continued to punch relentlessly until he finally cracked the chest open, exposing the glowing insignia. With a final, decisive blow, he shattered it. The golem exploded in a thunderous eruption, debris raining down around them. The alpha shielded himself from the falling rubble. With the golem's destruction, the witch's earthen shield collapsed. She glanced up to see a crow circling overhead, a symbol of the old alpha's impending funeral. Swiftly, she used her slingshot to bring the crow down, capturing its essence and transferring it into a doll. "Let me live!" a voice rasped from the settling dust. The burned and battered alpha stood before her, his body riddled with injuries, the witch says.
"You're one tough cookie, aren't you? But my father said to make an example out of you."
With cruel precision, she plunged her sharp nails into the doll's chest. Instantly, a matching wound appeared on the alpha, tearing through his flesh and organs. As she walked away, her tone was mocking.
"Try reviving from that."
With that final strike, the battle ended, and the witch stood victorious.